people are parachuting in right now. Like, look, they're going to look at the standings, the Bruins, and anybody who follows the NHL from the most treetop standpoint. This team is like threatening to have basically like the greatest regular season in NHL history. They're chasing a bunch of teams for most wins and most points. They're off the board to win the President's Trophy is like how big a favorite they are to have the most number of points in the league. So in other sports, Rob, I know like an all-time team, usually a big favorite to win the championship. Usually those teams all win the championship, and that's like sort of part of cementing their legacy. Not sure it's the same in hockey. What do you make of the Bruins? Are they really an all-time team? And does that matter in terms of postseason success?
I don't consider them an all-time team because of a lot of what they've built this year. I mean, they're very, very good, but a lot of it's come through goaltending, right? Allmark has had an amazing season. Even their backup, Jeremy Swayman, who's starting tonight, has been fantastic for them. It's not like their expected goals is off the charts this season relative to powerhouses of the past. Colorado last year had a much better season with their overall advanced metrics, but they didn't have the goaltending that the Bruins did. The challenge with hockey is that, and you guys have known this, I know Nick watches the NHL playoffs every year. I look basically live tweeting games and things like that. The amount of randomness in the playoffs is crazy. It's absurdly high, right? Because you get, for the most part, hockey is a pretty low scoring game. You have totals around the 6 mark, and the lower the scoring in a sport, the more variance you tend to get. And in hockey, you get that a ton in the playoffs, where you just get a goalie that gets really hot over the course of 5 or 6 games and steals a series for their team, like Jake Ottinger almost did last year against the Calgary Flames in the first round. You get teams who just get into a slump at a certain point or have a bad stylistic matchup with another team. So Boston's the deserving Stanley Cup favorite right now. They're the best team in hockey. They're in tier 1. They're adding to their team. They added Tyler Bertuzzi today from Detroit, which is only going to bolster their forwards going forwards. But with the amount of variance in the sport, I think you're insane to lay this type of price with Boston, especially with how loaded the Eastern Conference is and the types of matchups that they're going to get throughout the course of the playoffs. So very good team, not an all-time team in my opinion, and pretty bad bet to win the Stanley Cup, I think.
So Rob, price factored in, obviously. Which team would be your favorite bet right now to win the Stanley Cup?
I'd probably head out east. And this is not recency bias with Edmonton beating Toronto last night, but out west, excuse me, guys. 14-1, the Oilers right now, they stand out to me as a team that you'll look at them in the standings, competing for a playoff spot. They haven't even cemented their spot yet, but I think a lot of things have gone wrong for them this year. And part of that was just starting Jack Campbell in a lot of games. And they paid Jack Campbell in the offseason $25 million on a 5-year contract. They're trying to find his form. They just weren't able to do it all season long. Now they've turned back to Stuart Skinner, who is the much better option. Over the course of the past month, if you look at Edmonton in terms of every advanced metric possible, whether that's expected goals, Corsi, Fenwick, anything that would be predictive of future success, they've basically been a top 5 team. And one of the big criticisms of the Western Conference this year has been that they've stunk in the crossover matchups, right? When they've played the East has gotten the better of them for the large majority of this year. That hasn't been the case so much with Edmonton. They showcased that last night against Toronto. I think best player in the world, decent goaltending. They're showing that they're adding pieces. They acquired Matthias Ekholm yesterday, a pretty stable blue liner from the Nashville Predators. They're the one that stands out to me in just that. I think that they have an extra gear in them relative to a lot of the Western teams. And Colorado's a big toss-up because they probably will get Cale Makar back, but Cale Makar's been out with a concussion for a while now. Who knows? I mean, that's very iffy. He could come back too early, can get concussed again, and then all of a sudden Edmonton and Colorado are right neck and neck again. So the Oilers are the team that stands out to me as, I think, a good bet.
Rob, we're only 20 games to play, 18 games to play in some situation. 3 of the 4 divisions are scrambles, basically. Now, the 2 West divisions are complete madhouses. Like, any team can basically win. A bunch of the Pacific's been completely ridiculous the whole year. But the Hurricanes and the Devils in the Metro, the Hurricanes were out to minus 700 a few weeks ago, minus 500 a few weeks ago. It's compressed again. They lose, the Devils win, and the Devils win a couple improbable games the last couple weeks. Now it's Hurricanes basically minus 200, minus 220, Devils 2-1. I know we have a lot of Stanley Cup futures, fun playoff conversation. There are markets that settle in a month, basically, that are open. Do you have a strong opinion here down the stretch on who you like more between Carolina and Jersey?
I like Carolina more, but that doesn't mean that New Jersey's not a bad bet at this price. With 1 game behind or 1 point behind Carolina in the division, with Carolina does have 1 game in hand, but I rate Carolina as a better team than New Jersey overall. But question marks in net, we saw that last night with the Carolina Hurricanes. New Jersey is pretty much just as deep as Carolina overall, maybe not so much on the blue line, but they also have had great goaltending over the course of the past month or so. I don't think this is like one of those cases where if you're talking to an average fan, they wouldn't understand this from a probabilistic perspective, right? I like Carolina better than New Jersey. I think they're a better team. Plus 175, though, where they stand at the moment, I think that's a decent bet on the Devils. And honestly, even the Rangers at 25-1, where they are in the standings relative to these teams, all they have to do is go on a run. Now, granted, the Rangers are a little bit different because over the course of the past month, I think they vastly overachieved relative to the way that they've been playing. Their expected goals is pretty much league average over the last month, but they have a pretty unsustainable shooting percentage at like 12% over that period, which will probably die out at some point. But I think Carolina is just a little bit overpriced in this division race right now. And I mean, I don't mind a bet on either the Devils or the Rangers with where they stand.
You bet here with Nick and Ken on a tremendous Thursday as we welcome pro sports bettor Rob Pizzola back to the show of Bet Stamp, the Circles Off podcast, and The Hammer. You can follow The Hammer on Twitter at The Hammer HQ. Rob, let's talk awards here. Anything stands out to you in the NHL awards markets? Maybe it's the Norris Trophy where Carlson's minus 210 plays on a terrible team. Like, can Carlson win this award? Is that where you want to go? Anything else in the award markets interest you in the National Hockey League?
I think Carlson will win the award. If you asked me this a week ago, I thought Josh Morrissey with Winnipeg was a lot more live than I think he is now, because Winnipeg is just faltering. And that's a team going into the year that a lot of people didn't think was a playoff team altogether. I don't love their talent from top to bottom. There was a very reasonable case that Morrissey would win this if they ended the season hot, and they still can. They still can end it strong. But I think every day it tilts more and more towards Carlson, even though they're going to miss the playoffs. So nothing there from my perspective. The Vezina, I look at all the time, and I like Ullmark is going to win the Vezina, but I don't know if people realize the season that Ilya Sorokin is having for the New York Islanders. And if the Islanders get into the playoffs, I would vote Sorokin for the Vezina. I don't have a vote. 7-1. Last year, Igor Shesterkin had an unreal season. He was like, hands down, this is the best goalie in the world by a mile. He saved 35 goals above expected last season. Ilya Sorokin has already saved 44 goals above expected this year. He's saving almost a goal a game, which is unheard of. Like, it's off the charts. Shesterkin saved 0.7 goals per game last season above expected. Sorokin has been that much better. The Islanders are literally picking top 5, if not top 3, if they do not have Sorokin in net this year. So, I mean, I can see a scenario where they end up sneaking into the playoffs and maybe it turns because Boston doesn't have to ride Ullmark into the ground down the stretch here. He might split starts with Swayman. They might try to get him a little bit more healthy and do some load management stuff like we see in the NBA. So that's the one that stands out to me. But I mean, 7-1, I kind of like, I don't think that's, with the way that this is seen in market right now, I'm just like a little bit upset because I think that he should, have some Sorokin futures myself. I think he should be in consideration a little bit more. I subjectively feel like it's closer to 50-50, but I don't know that the voters are going to feel that way at the end of the year.
Yeah, right. And Rob and I both, I remember I was on Rob's podcast. We both have Ullmark from forever ago at insane prices. And it's been this, trying to figure out who the challenger is going to be, who to bet of the people to challenge Ullmark because the prices were so outrageous. And Rob, one thing you didn't, and I know you know this, but one thing you didn't bring up, the general managers vote for this award. So we have no insight into Sorokin might be ahead right now. We have no idea. We have no clue. All the media polling is Ullmark, but we have no, these general we're going to go ask them. We have no idea what they think right now. And even when they were polled about who the best goalie is, Ullmark came in 7th. Which is completely ridiculous, and that Greg Wyshynski article for ESPN. So I want to ask you one more Norris thing real quick, and then I know Nick wants to ask you about the NFL for a minute. So you said like you think Karlsson's going to win. I don't watch hockey. I have like no knowledge of hockey history. It seems like 100 points is this like magical barrier for a defenseman that like only 2 people have ever done. Give me like a number. Like if Karlsson gets to 90, you think he wins. If he gets to 95, you think. I have no frame of reference for this, as opposed to like RBIs or home runs or something. What does Karlsson you think have to get to win in like 30 seconds?
So the thing with Karlsson is that he at one point was by a mile the best defenseman in the league. And then he completely fell off a cliff, and now he's regained his form, and it's a feel-good story for people. So I don't necessarily think it's like a point total. He's just had a really good season, and he continues to produce. I think as long as he doesn't get injured, he's going to win the award, just being the veteran that like rejuvenated his career. So I don't think it's a points thing. We saw Roman Josi put up a ton of points and not win the Norris before. It's happened where the top point getter doesn't win. I think it's just the story with Erik Karlsson, really.
Rob?